Hey, what's up? Justin here, and welcome back to 65 Drums. Today we're doing a versus video about metal electronic hi-hats versus rubber electronic hi-hats. It's a night and day difference to play on one of these versus one of these. This is kind of a broad topic though, because there's metal hi-hats that have holes in them, there's the ones like this that have dampening, and then of course there's lots of different price ranges. You got $300 rubber hi-hats and you got $800 rubber hi-hats. So I'm going to try to do this as much justice as possible. And the four different categories here that we're going to cover are the volume differences, the feel differences, triggering, and then overall stage presence. Whenever you talk about metal electronic hi-hats, everyone's first thought is, well, what about the volume differences? So that's why I put it at the beginning of the video so we can get that out of the way. Here are some volume comparisons between 14-inch two-piece electronic hi-hats that are made out of metal, 14-inch two-piece rubber electronic hi-hats, and then I'm also throwing the VH10 in here because it's a one piece, 12 inches, and you know it'll be a little bit quieter, but it should be good for like a comparison. But of course, the metal cymbals are the loudest. Everybody saw this coming. I can't say this for certain on every single cymbal out there, but here's a couple of rules and thumb to keep in mind. The smaller the cymbal, the quieter it will be. Also, if you have a one-piece cymbal, that will be quieter than having a bottom piece for the hi-hat. I don't know why, but it instantly makes it louder, like amplifies the noise somehow. Different kinds of rubber cymbals will be louder or quieter than each other, just depending on the rubber mixture, the amount of plastic used, and all that fun stuff. Same with metal cymbals. The low volume cymbals that have all the holes in them, those will be quieter than the regular metal cymbals. Now, I've actually seen different kinds of dampening systems with metal cymbals. I've seen some companies will literally stack two cymbals on top of each other with a piece of plastic in the middle or a piece of foam or something, some sort of dampening material in the middle. And then other companies where they just have one top cymbal piece and then they'll have a giant sheet of plastic exactly the same size but underneath the cymbal. That's the way the Surge cymbals and the Pearl E Classic cymbals do it. And they're both made by a different company, which I can't remember the name of. And then finally, you'll have some companies that have a piece of rubber in the middle with a piece of metal, not exactly the size of a cymbal, holding that to the top piece of the cymbal. Every company does it differently, but in general, metal cymbals will be louder no matter what you do. There are differences depending on the make, the model, and the brand. But this is either going to be a huge deal to you and vital information, or you won't care. These cymbals actually sound pretty darn decent when you take away all the muffling. They sound like regular acoustic cymbals because they are. Because of where I live in the country where not many people live around me, I could play acoustic drums all day and no one would really care. If you live in apartments, then you will have to go with rubber cymbals. Okay, so moving ahead to category number 2, let's talk about the overall feel of the cymbals, which is more fun to play on. Not talking about triggering yet, just how they feel. Rubber cymbals are better than they used to be. You know, every company has a different rubber mixture they're working on. Some companies want their cymbals to feel a little bit more soft. Other companies want the rubber cymbals to feel a little bit more firm, so it's more of got like closer to that metallic feel, but still retaining the low volume. Every company has a different strategy here. But I've got to say, metal electronic hi-hats, they feel better to play on. How important this is to you will depend on you. For some people, it's not worth the sacrifice. They don't care how good electronic drums feel. They just want something that's quiet. That is the utmost importance to them. Other people, they can take, a sacrifice here and there as long as they get something that looks great and feels really, really awesome. These are the best feeling electronic hi-hats I've ever played in my life. They feel better than the v-hihats. They feel better than my ATV hi-hats, better than the v-hihats. And that's because they're made out of metal. The interesting thing though is that these don't feel exactly like acoustic hi-hats. And the reason isn't really surprising when you think about it. Acoustic hi-hats, if you hit them in slow motion, you'll see that they wave around like this. And they're also pretty thin. But with this, it's twice as thick as a regular acoustic cymbal. So it's going to be heavier, and that also means it's going to feel kind of dead while you're hitting it. So the feel isn't exactly the same, but this is pretty much as close as you can possibly get because you're actually hitting a piece of metal. Rubber cymbals, they've come a long way. They feel amazing, just not quite to the degree of the metal cymbals. Okay, so moving ahead to the next category, let's talk about trigger accuracy. Which type of cymbal is better at picking up your overall playing? Both sides have figured out the top piece of the cymbal. It's basically a crash cymbal mounted onto a hi-hat stand. All it has to do is tell the difference between a bow area and the edge. So everyone's figured that out. It's no problem. The big problem, the thing that trips up every company, is trying to get a mechanism that accurately shows the drum module how open or closed the hi-hat is. Everyone has a different mechanism. Some work better than others. For example, ATV actually has to be plugged into a wall. It uses an electronic eye that bounces or reflects off a small white disc from the top cymbal. Other companies use more of like a piston design, such as Roland, such as like Edrum. And then you have other companies that have like a piston that's actually locked into the top piece with the field hi-hats that I have. If you spend a decent amount of money, you will find decent hi-hats on both angles. So I can't really give a winner here. I will say if you go all the way up to the best of the best of the best, I think the v-hihats has the best overall triggering. So that would give a slight win to rubber cymbals, but you have to spend decent money to get good hi-hats on either side. Moving on to category number 4, let's talk about overall stage presence. Rubber hi-hats have come a very long way. There are lots of different options out there. Like for example, let's talk about some of the hi-hats on the TD20SX. Let's talk about the hi-hats on the TD30KV. Those are freaking awesome. They got that metallic finish on it in different shades of silver. Those looked awesome. Unfortunately though, they eventually wear off, so that's why they went back to matte black. You also have like the Pintech options where they're clear plastic in whatever color you want with a rubber pad on it. Lauren drums, they'll literally print whatever kind of design you want on their cymbals. And then of course you go to the more classic rubber hi-hats. You've got the ones that have the fake lathing on them. If you go with Yamaha, they have like the fake hand hammered design on them. ATV goes with a more clean design. There's no markings on them at all, if that's more the route you want to go with. But all those options pale into comparison with metal cymbals, in my opinion. Take a look at all these cymbals from like Jobecki, from Field, from Stealth Drums, from Diamond. Like there's tons of companies out there that make metal cymbals now. They look amazing. There are so many different finish options. Unless you're really looking for the wires, you can't tell that these aren't acoustic cymbals. They look really good. They blend in. You could put this on an acoustic set and it would be kind of hard to tell the difference from a distance. Okay, so jumping ahead to category number 5, this is a bunch of odds and ends that I wanted to mention, but they didn't really need their own category. So at number 1, you'll notice that when you switched over to rubber cymbals from acoustic drums, you stopped having to buy drumsticks. It was like you canceled a Netflix subscription. There was $8 to $10 a month you didn't have to spend anymore. It's almost impossible to break your sticks on rubber cymbals. If anything, you could break a stick on like the rubber rim of an electronic drum, but that's about it. But of course, when you switch over to metal electronic cymbals, the potential for stick damage comes back again. Same as if you take off the rubber rim guard from your snare. If you're doing rim shots, you'll start to nick up your stick doing that as well. So on these field hi-hats, they actually have a little piece of rubber running around the bottom. Other cymbals don't have that rubber rim guard, so they probably will damage your sticks over time. I should probably mention a little trick that some people use. They'll take those practice tips for drumsticks and glue them onto the tip of their drumsticks and use that to play electronic drums. If you do not glue them onto your sticks, they will fall off. I've already demonstrated that in a previous video. But anyway, apparently that does help reduce the volume of cymbals. Also, some companies actually sell them with them pre-attached. You can buy those. I've resigned myself to the fact that if I'm using metal electronic hi-hats, they're just going to be louder. And then of course, the final thing I want to mention is that metal electronic hi-hats will be heavier than rubber cymbals, as you probably already guessed, but they're going to be even heavier than regular acoustic hi-hats because you have that dampening layer, you have the top piece, and you probably have some sort of metal piece underneath of that. So if you have a weak hi-hat spring, you're really going to have to push your foot down a lot and then affix it to the stand so that it goes in its correct place. So keep that in mind. Weaker hi-hat springs will be a little bit annoying with metal electronic hi-hats. At the end of the video, I will mention that I do have a preference. I do prefer rubber cymbals over metal cymbals. It's not because I hate metal cymbals. In fact, I think these look superior. I think they feel superior. I just like the fact that the rubber cymbals give me more flexibility. If I do go to a smaller apartment, then I will have the flexibility to still keep using those cymbals on the day-to-day because they are quieter. But every drummer will have a different preference. Hopefully this video gave you like the facts so you can decide what might be best for you. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all in a few.